has gone from a mundane term, and now refers to the most basic and essential of human interactions. Now, healthy. Physicians have a lot of responsibilities, some of which they are always claiming, and others which they're really quite silent about, but still exist as a responsibility. Co-equal with a physician's responsibility to cure and prevent illness is a responsibility to provide hope and comfort. It's an essential part of the art of medicine. Providing hope and comfort requires global human connectedness, imagery, insight, and optimism. If you think about statistics, if a patient has a 5% chance of survival, and you're talking about the use of resources, you might say, well, 5% isn't very big. But from the patient's point of view, the patient's family's point of view, that's a 1 in 20 chance. I mean, that's a pretty good chance, and they may feel that that chance needs to be acted on, and that what needs to be provided is the hope that they will be part of that 5% rather than some alternative thinking about the other 95%. And there may be, and there probably is, an optimism deficit in medicine and in human society in general. And it's part of the physician's duty to combat that. It's probably just as important as the other things that physicians do, this providing of hope and comfort. Now, if you then bring this back to physics, which is something where there are hard realities in physics, and it's kind of nice because it's not quite as controversial as some of the other areas that we're talking about, and there's this concept which has been there a long time, mutual attraction between bodies. It's one of the basic elements in physics, and gravity is the most common example of that. And actually, Einstein postulated an opposite, repelling force. And during his lifetime, there was no evidence. There was just a postulate. He thought it occurred, but there was no evidence for it. Recently, in the past few months, there has come to light evidence for this negative gravity, which is also known as dark energy, which has recently been found. And Sheila and I feel there's an analogy between these two physical forces, one of attraction and one of repellent forces, and the forces of, on the one hand, optimism, hope, and comfort, and on the other hand, pessimism, despair, and mean-spiritedness. Now, when you think about mean-spiritedness, it would be remarkable that you probably hold a belief, which is quite strong, that it's increasing or decreasing. I bet not a single member of the audience feels it's remaining constant. And you would imagine that everybody sitting around you holds the same belief as you, that it's increasing or decreasing. But when we started to look into this, people are in two camps. There are people who believe it's really going up, that mean-spiritedness is a serious problem, getting worse all the time. And there are other people who believe the exact opposite, that society is getting better, people are sharing more, everything's getting better. So, mean-spiritedness, we feel, is probably a constant. Just as Einstein referred to dark energy as the cosmological constant. But it's almost never perceived as a constant. Depending upon the environment where you live, you believe that mean-spiritedness is really moving in one direction or the other. And the perception of mean-spiritedness is influenced by connectedness in two ways. Friendship, true friendship with global human connectedness, is likely to convince one that mean-spiritedness is decreasing. The world is getting better. Everything's getting better. Whereas impersonal connectedness, a man sitting alone in a room with a computer without any friendships that he's engaging into, without warmth, is likely to convince one that mean-spiritedness is on the rise. And what determines which camp you're in? Well, believe it or not, we felt perhaps it has something to do with cockroaches on the one hand and oil on the other. And some of you may already have known that before we got to this slide, but for others it may be surprising. A substantial number of people in the world live in parts of the world where cockroaches have been for millions of years, and they're much more successful than other life forms. In Canada, because it gets so cold in the winter, no cockroaches survive the winter. So up here, in places that are characteristic of Canada, where there's not a lot of stuff imported from farther south, there are no cockroaches. And here we benefit from the high price of oil, whereas in many parts of the world, people suffer from the high price of oil. And we found, as we started to research this, that people living particularly in New York and Philadelphia believe that mean-spiritedness is rising like you wouldn't believe. It's a terrible problem. Whereas people who live in this part of Canada tend to believe that life is getting better and that people are sharing and that things are considerably better year by year. And does this have anything to do with medicine? Well, it certainly does, because particularly in the US, a lot of medicine is now based on the fear of litigation, being sued. And so you have all sorts of inappropriate and futile treatments carried out because of the fear of litigation, antibiotic resistance due to the treatment of viral illness as bacterial, at the insistence of patients or relatives. You know it won't work, but you know that it will satisfy the family because it's what the family's asking, and they are less likely to sue you if you give this inappropriate treatment, and so you do it. And patients in painful, no-win medical situations being kept alive by technology against their will, once again, because someone else in the system wants this. These are all sort of medical consequences of mean-spiritedness. Now, is mean-spiritedness ever adaptive? I don't know if some of you from the US have been here long enough to feel this fear, but it's quite amusing that many people from the US coming to Canada and staying here for a while begin to fear that they're going to lose their edge, that killer instinct that allows them to survive, to stay on top in the United States. They stay in Canada long enough, they're going to lose that. Well, I became interested in this concept of the edge. And there is a movie, of course, The Edge, which is actually filmed, and part of it in this part of the world.
In Canmore, where I live.
Yes, right. And even in that movie, which is very interesting because actually the good guy wins if you're talking about the human beings. But many people think that the main character is actually the bear, and of course the bear dies. But not only does the good guy win, but the rich guy wins. And it's clear that in that movie world, you don't have to be mean-spirited to survive. All you have to do is to think, because the more thoughtful of the characters is the one who survives. So it's not clear that you need that edge. It's not clear that those of you from the United States are at serious risk. If you stay here too long, you'll lose your competitive edge. And there is a contrasting view of the world. There's a 2000 book, which, believe it or not, is called It's Getting Better All the Time. Now, some of you may not have read this book, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. 100 Greatest Trends in the Last 100 Years by Stephen Moore and Julian L. Simon points out that we're eating far better food and spending less money for it than a century ago. Many of our neighbors are becoming millionaires. Human beings just keep getting stronger and stronger, as witnessed by the constant shattering of athletic records. On and on. The book details the positive trends, the